Snow was falling gently onto the wet asphalt of New York City as the bright billboards of Times Square reflected in the puddles scattered across the sidewalks. Inside a luxurious cafe in the heart of the city, Olivia Bennett, a 28-year-old doctor, wrapped her cold hands around a cup of coffee, gazing out the window. She wore a sleek wool coat and leather boots that perfectly matched the status she had worked so hard to achieve. Everything around her screamed success, a high salary, professional recognition, and a promising future at one of the country's top private clinics. But why, then, did her heart feel so empty? She had everything most people dreamed of. And yet, something inside her still felt like it was missing. Before we continue, if you enjoy inspiring stories, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss anything. And tell me in the comments, have you ever made a decision that completely changed the course of your life? The doubt that was eating away at Olivia had begun years ago when she was still a medical student. She had always had a genuine desire to help people, but over time, the prestige and financial stability of the profession had led her down a safe and predictable path. Her flawless resume had landed her a position at a renowned hospital where she treated influential patients, yet she didn't feel fulfilled. Something inside her was screaming for a greater purpose. That night, as she held her cup and watched the frantic world outside, her phone vibrated. A notification from an old professor flashed on the screen. "Dr. Bennett, I know your life is stable, but I need volunteer doctors for a mission in remote parts of Latin America. These are places where healthcare is almost non-existent. If you ever feel like making a difference in another way, think about it." The message echoed in her mind. A shiver ran down her spine. Olivia had always wanted to truly help, but she had never had the courage to step out of her comfort zone. But what if this was the chance to fill the emptiness she felt? That night, she couldn't sleep. The internal conflict between the security of her current life and the call to something greater was growing inside her. Little did Olivia know that by following this impulse, her life was about to change forever. The sun timidly rose over New York, painting the skyscrapers with golden hues. Olivia Bennett hadn't closed her eyes all night. The professor's message still pulsed in her mind like an endless echo. She got out of bed, grabbed a glass of water, and stared at her own reflection in the mirror. Her eyes revealed the storm of thoughts consuming her. "You can't seriously be considering this, Olivia," she muttered to herself, running her fingers through her hair. The day went on like any other. Appointments, meetings, and a dinner scheduled with colleagues. But inside, she felt stuck in limbo. The hospital was pristine. The hallways smelled of cleanliness and sophistication, and the patients were business tycoons, celebrities, and people who could afford the best care. And yet, every conversation felt hollow. That afternoon, sitting in her office, Olivia typed an email to the professor. Her heart pounded as the words appeared on the screen. "Professor Reynolds, I'm interested in the medical mission. Can you send me more details?" The moment she hit send, a chill ran down her spine. Was this the first step toward changing her life? The next day, the reply came quickly. "Olivia, I'm glad you're interested. We need doctors in a remote village in Latin America. The community suffers from a lack of basic health care, poor sanitation, and preventable diseases. The work is tough, but incredibly rewarding. If you're willing, we leave in 2 weeks." 2 weeks? That phrase echoed in her mind like a distant bell. Up until now, the idea had felt like a far-off dream, something to consider someday. But now, it was real. The clock was ticking. That night, Olivia met up with Ethan, her best friend and fellow doctor. They sat in a high-end restaurant, and she decided to tell him everything. "You're really thinking about leaving everything behind?" Ethan raised an eyebrow, putting his silverware down. I don't know, but I feel like I need to do this. Something inside me is pulling me toward it." He sighed, thoughtful. "I get it. But you have an amazing career here. You've built all of this with so much effort. What if it's not what you think it'll be? And what if it's exactly what I need?" They locked eyes for a few moments. Ethan knew Olivia well enough to understand that once she set her mind on something, there was hardly any turning back. "Then I guess you've already made up your mind," Ethan said, offering a small smile. That night, Olivia went home and collapsed onto the couch. She picked up her phone and dialed her mother's number. "Hi, sweetheart. How was your day?" Olivia hesitated for a second. "Mom, I made an important decision. I'm leaving my job and traveling to a village in Latin America to work as a volunteer doctor." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. "Olivia, are you sure about this?" She took a deep breath. "I've never been so sure of anything in my life." What she didn't know was that this decision wouldn't just change the lives of the people she would help, it would completely transform her own existence. New York's airport was as busy as ever. Voices echoed, suitcases rolled across the polished floors, and digital boards flashed with flight schedules. Olivia Bennett stood there, gripping her ticket with slightly trembling hands. Her heart was pounding. In her suitcase, she had packed only a few clothes, some basic medical equipment, and a notebook where she would record her experiences. What she was about to do felt surreal. Beside her, Ethan adjusted his tie, watching her with concern. "There's still time to change your mind, Olivia." She gave him a small, knowing smile. "I know, but I don't want to." He let out a heavy sigh. "Just promise me you'll take care of yourself." "I promise." They hugged tightly, and Ethan whispered, "Don't forget to come back." A few minutes later, Olivia walked through the departure gates, and then the plane took off, carrying her to a world completely different from the one she knew. The flight was long. With every passing hour, the landscape below changed. The cold blue of skyscrapers gave way to the deep green of forests, mountains, and small isolated communities. When she finally landed at an airport in Latin America, she was greeted by the suffocating heat of the humid air. There was no luxury or sophistication like in New York, just a simple airport with slow-spinning ceiling fans. Waiting for her was Dr. Miguel Alvarez, a middle-aged man with tanned skin and tired but kind eyes. "Dr. Bennett?" He smiled. "Welcome. I hope you're ready for a life-changing experience." She shook his hand firmly. "I hope so." The journey to the village was made in an old Jeep that rattled with every bump on the dirt road. Olivia gazed out the window, taking in every detail. Barefoot children chasing a makeshift soccer ball, women washing clothes in the river, small wooden stalls selling exotic fruits. Everything felt so far removed from the world she knew. When they arrived, Olivia realized that the so-called hospital was actually a small, unfinished brick building with window openings but no glass, and only a handful of medical supplies. A line of patients was already waiting outside, their faces weary, their clothes worn. She felt a tightness in her chest. "This is our medical post. It's not much, but we save lives here," Dr. Miguel said, noticing the surprise on her face. Olivia swallowed hard. She had known things would be different, but she hadn't expected this much of a contrast. The first day was a shock. She treated dozens of patients with illnesses that could have easily been prevented with access to basic sanitation. Fevers, skin infections, severe malnutrition, children who had never been vaccinated. At one point, a little girl named Sophia, no older than 6, reached for her hand. "Are you a real doctor?" the girl asked, her eyes shining with curiosity. Olivia smiled and knelt beside her. "I am. Are you going to make me better?" Her heart tightened. "I'll do my best, Sophia." That night, Olivia lay on the hard bed of the dormitory with no air conditioning, just a noisy ceiling fan spinning lazily above her. Outside, the sound of crickets and the wind rustling through the trees filled the darkness. For the first time in a long while, she felt something different. Not luxury, not comfort, but purpose. Little did Olivia know that this was only the first of many lessons she would learn in that place. The sun hadn't even risen when she was woken by an urgent knock on the dormitory door. The loud pounding echoed through the silent night. Still groggy, she got up and opened the door, finding Dr. Miguel with a tense expression. "We need you at the clinic now. A patient just arrived in critical condition." Olivia's heart pounded. She hadn't even been in the village for 24 hours, and she was already facing her first big test. The small clinic was dimly lit, with only a few yellowish bulbs casting shadows across the room. The thick smell of disinfectant mixed with the stifling heat, making the air feel heavy. On the only available cot lay a middle-aged man, drenched in sweat, breathing heavily. His skin was burning hot to the touch, and his half-closed eyes revealed the toll of a high fever. "He got here about an hour ago," a local nurse explained, wiping sweat from her own forehead. High fever, chills, body aches. Olivia quickly assessed the man. The diagnosis hit her like a lightning bolt. "Malaria," Dr. Miguel nodded. "Yes. And the problem is, we don't have enough medicine." Olivia's chest tightened. Back in New York, she could have simply prescribed the right medication and monitored the patient's recovery in a fully equipped hospital. But here, supplies were scarce. "What can we do?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. "Hydration, and hope his body can hold on until we get more medicine." Olivia felt a lump in her throat. This was the brutal difference between first-world medicine and survival medicine. She held the patient's hand, feeling it cold and clammy. He opened his eyes with great effort and mumbled, "Am I going to die, doctor?" The question hit her like a punch to the gut. "Don't worry, we're going to take care of you." And so, Olivia sat by his side, monitoring his fever, taking turns with the other volunteers to press cool cloths against his burning forehead, trying to calm the violent shivers that racked his body. The hours crawled by. Every passing minute, she wondered if she had made a mistake leaving her comfortable life behind, only to feel helpless in the face of such a dire situation. Dawn broke with devastating news. The patient hadn't made it. The confirmation hit Olivia like an avalanche. No matter how much she had prepared for this, no matter how many years she had studied to handle medical emergencies, losing a patient under her care felt like a deep, open wound. She left the clinic without saying a word, the weight of her decision pressing down on her for the first time. She walked over to a tree and sat in its shade, staring at the ground, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. Minutes later, Dr. Miguel approached and sat beside her. "I know how you feel. The first loss is always the hardest. I can't accept it. If we had the right medicine, he would have survived. Yes, but here, we don't always have what we need. And we have to learn to work with what we do have." Olivia ran a hand over her face, trying to suppress the flood of emotions. I just wanted to do more." Dr. Miguel sighed, tilting his head back to look at the sky, where the morning sun was beginning to cast light over the tall trees surrounding the village. "Believe me, Olivia, your presence here is making more of a difference than you realize." She took a deep breath, letting the warm morning air fill her lungs. The pain of loss was still there, but something inside her was beginning to shift. From that day on, Olivia realized that being a doctor, there wasn't just about healing. It meant fighting, learning to lose, and still finding the strength to move forward. And this was only the first of many battles. The next morning, Olivia still felt the weight of loss. The village's quietness contrasted with the chaotic noise in her mind. The image of the patient, the high fever, the helplessness in the face of scarce resources. It all haunted her. She thought about New York. There she would have state-of-the-art equipment, accessible labs, and all the support she needed. Here, all she had were her hands, her courage, and a heart full of uncertainty. But then, something unexpected happened. As she walked toward the medical post, a little girl ran up to her. It was Sophia, the same girl who had held her hand on the first day. With a shy smile, she held something out for Olivia. "This is for you." Olivia took the small gift and saw that it was a necklace made of colorful beads with a tiny wooden heart carved at the center. "Did you make this?" Sophia nodded, still holding her hand. "Thank you for taking care of us." That simple phrase was like a balm for Olivia's soul. For the first time since she arrived, she realized she wasn't just there to save lives. She was there to be present, to be a symbol of hope for people who had no one else. She knelt down and put the necklace around her neck. "I promise I'll take care of you all the best I can." That day, Olivia made a decision, not to drown in sorrow, but to use this experience to become even better. "I want to meet every patient, understand every need, and learn everything I can about how I can help," she told Dr. Miguel. He smiled. "That's the difference between an ordinary doctor and a doctor who truly changes lives." And so, Olivia began spending more time with the villagers. She visited homes, learned about their struggles, and met mothers who had lost children due to a lack of basic medical care. She realized that treating symptoms wasn't enough. She had to tackle the root causes. That's when she had an idea. That night, in her small dormitory room, Olivia grabbed her notebook and started writing a plan. If we want to prevent more losses, we need vaccines. We need medicine. We need sanitation. She scribbled down possibilities, listed contacts she still had in the US, and drafted a project to seek donations. If the problem was a lack of resources, then she would go after them. The next day, Olivia presented her idea to Dr. Miguel. I want to reach out to international contacts and gather support to bring medicine, vaccines, and improvements to the health post. He crossed his arms and smiled, impressed by her determination. You really came here to make a difference, didn't you? I can't just accept that more people will die from something preventable. Dr. Miguel nodded. Then let's get started. And with that, Olivia gave her mission a new purpose. She wasn't just there to treat the sick, she was there to transform that place. What she didn't know was that, in doing so, her own life would also be transformed forever. The following days were intense. Olivia dedicated herself entirely to the project of raising funds for medicine and vaccines for the village. She used every free moment between patient visits to write emails, contact medical organizations, and even reach out to former professors and colleagues. Her excitement grew with every positive response she received. Small donations started trickling in, and hope was reignited within her. For the first time since she arrived, she felt like she could truly make a long-term difference. But then, like a bucket of cold water, the first major obstacle appeared. On a stifling Tuesday morning, Dr. Miguel walked into the clinic with a serious expression. We need to talk. Olivia set down the patient file she was reviewing and followed him to a quieter corner. What happened? He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck, visibly tense. The local government has blocked the entry of external donations. Olivia's eyes widened. What? What do you mean? There's a lot of bureaucracy involved. Some local politicians want strict control over everything that comes into the country. Unless we get an official authorization, the donations will be stuck in customs. Olivia's blood boiled. But that's insane! We're talking about medicine that could save lives. Yes, but that's not their priority. To them, we're just a small, insignificant clinic in the middle of nowhere. Frustration consumed her. How could she help these people if the very system meant to protect them was standing in the way? Olivia spent the entire afternoon trying to resolve the situation. She sent emails to local authorities, made phone calls, and reached out to influential contacts in the US. But every response felt like another door slamming in her face. By the end of the day, she sat on the porch of the dormitory, exhausted. That's when Ethan called. Hey, how are you? His familiar voice brought an instant wave of comfort. I feel powerless, she admitted. She explained the entire situation, and on the other end of the line, Ethan remained silent for a few seconds. You can't let this stop you, Olivia. There's always a way. She sighed, gazing up at the starry sky. And what if there isn't? You've faced worse challenges. What amazes me about you is that when people say, there's no way, you always find one. His words reignited something inside her. Maybe there was a way after all. The next day, Olivia went to the local government office. She endured hours of waiting, bureaucracy, and skeptical glances. But she didn't back down. Finally, she secured a meeting with a government representative. A man in a light suit with an indifferent expression listened to her explanation and responded with a cold tone. I understand your concern, doctor, but without the proper documentation, we can't release the donations. Olivia took a deep breath, and instead of arguing, she did something unexpected. If you come to our village and spend a day with us, maybe you'll better understand what's at stake. The man raised an eyebrow, surprised by the invitation. A day? Yes. See it with your own eyes. After a long silence, he finally nodded. Fine, but I'm not promising anything. The next morning, the representative arrived in the village, accompanied by 2 aides. Olivia and Dr. Miguel welcomed him and made sure to show him everything. The line of patients who had been waiting since dawn for medical care. The sick children who could be cured with a simple dose of medicine. The desperate mothers with no access to vaccines for their babies. Slowly, the coldness in the man's face began to fade. He observed everything in silence, his eyes scanning the reality around him. And then, something unexpected happened. A frail, elderly woman, clutching a rosary in her hands, approached him and spoke in a voice thick with emotion. "Doctor, please, don't abandon us." That simple plea hit him like a punch to the gut. In that moment, Olivia knew she had reached him. The following week, the news arrived. The donations had been approved. When Olivia received the confirmation, she felt tears of relief streaming down her face. She had won. And this victory wasn't just hers. It belonged to every person in that village who would finally have access to what they so desperately needed. That night, as she watched the children playing in the village square, she felt something she hadn't in a long time. Peace. She finally understood that the kind of medicine she had always longed to practice wasn't in New York's luxurious hospitals. It was here, among these people. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity in the village. Trucks arrived, unloading boxes of medicine, vaccines, and basic medical supplies. The villagers looked at Olivia with admiration and gratitude, as if she had made the impossible happen. The next morning, the health clinic was packed. Mothers brought their children to be vaccinated, and elderly patients arrived to receive medications that had never been available there before. While giving a vaccine to a 3-year-old boy, Olivia felt a pang in her heart. "Does it hurt?" she asked softly. The little boy looked up at her with teary eyes, trying hard not to cry. "A little bit," Olivia smiled and pulled a lollipop from her coat pocket. "Then you deserve a prize for being so brave." His face lit up with a shy smile, and in that moment, Olivia realized just how much of an impact even the smallest actions could have. Days passed, and the transformation in the village was visible. The children looked healthier. The adults smiled more. The fear of preventable diseases was beginning to fade. Dr. Miguel watched everything with a quiet smile. "I've never seen this place so full of hope." Olivia let out a deep breath, watching the busy clinic. "That means we're on the right path." He nodded, crossing his arms. "But we can't stop here. Now that we have the medicine, we need to teach people how to protect themselves." That's when Olivia had another idea. The following week, she organized workshops on hygiene, nutrition, and disease prevention. At first, the villagers were skeptical, but little by little, they began to participate. Children listened attentively as Olivia and the other volunteers taught them the importance of washing their hands, drinking clean water, and eating a balanced diet. One day, after a session, a 17-year-old girl named Maria approached Olivia. "Dr. Olivia, can I learn to be a doctor too?" The question caught Olivia by surprise. "You want to be a doctor?" Maria nodded shyly. "I've always wanted to, but I never thought it was possible." Olivia felt warmth spread through her chest. "Anything is possible, Maria. If you really want it, I can start teaching you some things." And just like that, Maria became Olivia's first apprentice. That small conversation shifted something inside Olivia. She realized that bringing help from the outside wasn't enough. The real change would come from teaching and empowering the people of the village so that one day they could sustain themselves. That night, as she gazed up at the starry sky, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The life that once seemed so meticulously planned back in New York now felt distant. Here, in the middle of this simple village, she finally felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. And so, the months passed. And Olivia was no longer a foreigner in the village. She had become part of it. Every day, new changes took place. The small, once precarious health post now had a steady supply of medicine, vaccines, and basic medical equipment. Maria, her young apprentice, was already assisting in treatments, learning with dedication and a sparkle in her eyes. Olivia felt like she was building something bigger than she had ever imagined. But then, an unexpected email changed everything. That night, exhausted after yet another long day of work, Olivia picked up her phone and saw a message from a prestigious hospital in New York. "Dr. Bennett, we have an open position for you. Your talent and dedication are undeniable, and we would love to have you back. Can we schedule a conversation?" She froze, staring at the screen. For so long, that hospital had been her biggest goal. Stability, recognition, prestige. And now, all of it was within her reach again. But then, Olivia looked around. In the small dormitory where she lived, the ceiling fans spun lazily. Outside, children played, Villagers laughed and chatted like one big family. Suddenly, her heart tightened. Did she really want to leave? The next day, Olivia spoke with Dr. Miguel. "The hospital in New York wants me to come back," she said, feeling the weight of those words. He studied her for a moment before responding. "And what do you want?" She sighed, gazing at the health post. "I don't know. I always thought my life was there. But now everything feels different." Dr. Miguel gave her a small smile. "You know, Olivia, when you first came here, you were a brilliant doctor, but there was an emptiness in your heart. Now I see someone who has found a purpose." She lowered her head, lost in thought. "But what if I can do more out there? Secure more resources, bring more help?" "Maybe. But ask yourself this. Where do you truly feel like you belong?" That question echoed inside her for the rest of the day. That evening, as Olivia was organizing some files in the health post, Sophia came running in and hugged her tightly. "You're not leaving, are you, Dr. Olivia?" Her heart clenched. "Why do you think that, sweetheart?" "Because I heard some people talking." Olivia knelt down and took the little girl's hands in hers. "I don't know what I'm going to do yet." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "But if you leave, who's going to take care of us?" That question struck Olivia like lightning. She realized she could no longer see this place as a temporary mission. She belonged here, and for the first time, she was certain of her answer. That night, Olivia couldn't sleep. She lay on her simple bed, listening to the soft wind rustling through the trees. Her thoughts were torn between two worlds. On one side, New York, a stable career, recognition, comfort. On the other, the village, purpose, daily challenges, real impact. What really mattered? The next morning, Olivia decided to find a quiet place to think. She walked to a small stream near the village. The crystal-clear water flowed gently, as if trying to give her an answer. That's when Maria appeared. "You've been acting strange these past few days," the young apprentice said, sitting beside her. Olivia gave a small smile. "I'm trying to make an important decision." Maria was silent for a moment, staring at the water. "You know, when you first arrived here, I thought doctors were distant, unreachable people. But then you showed me that I can be like you." Olivia turned to her, surprised. "You really think that?" Maria nodded, her smile sincere. "If you decide to leave, I'll understand. But just know that you've already changed so many lives here, including mine." Her words struck Olivia right in the heart. She realized that the impact she had made went beyond medicine and consultations. She was inspiring people, and that was a mission no job in New York could ever replace. That afternoon, Olivia wrote her response to the hospital. "I truly appreciate the opportunity, but I have already found my true purpose. I hope you understand my decision." As she pressed send, a weight lifted off her shoulders. She had made her choice. She was staying, and at that moment, there were no more doubts. By the end of the day, Dr. Miguel noticed something different in her expression. "You've made your decision, haven't you?" Olivia smiled. "Yes, I'm staying." The doctor nodded with satisfaction. "Then welcome to your new life, Dr. Olivia." And with that, her fate was sealed. The village was no longer just a temporary mission. It was home. Time passed, and Olivia didn't just stay. She transformed the village. The small, once struggling health post became a well-equipped medical center with more volunteers and essential supplies. Maria, her apprentice, became a dedicated medical assistant, dreaming of one day becoming a doctor herself. The children were healthier, the mothers more hopeful, and Olivia's impact could be seen in every smile and every life saved. One sunny afternoon, as Olivia finished treating a patient, she heard cheerful voices outside. "What's going on?" she asked, curious. Maria appeared with a mischievous grin. "Come see." Olivia stepped outside and found almost the entire community gathered. In the center of the square, a makeshift banner read, "Thank you, Dr. Olivia. You changed our lives." Children ran to hug her, and elderly villagers shook her hands warmly. Her heart overflowed with emotion. She looked around and realized something she had never truly felt before, not even in the comfort of her life in New York. She was exactly where she was meant to be. That night, as she wrote in her journal, she reflected on her journey. From the luxury of the big city to the simplicity of the village, from uncertainty to purpose, from technical medicine to medicine of the heart, she picked up the small beaded necklace that Sophia had given her months before and smiled. That was the greatest gift she could have ever received, the love and gratitude of a people who were now her family. And there, beneath a starry sky, Olivia was certain of one thing. She no longer needed to search for her purpose. She had already found it, and she was exactly where she was meant to be.